very much. Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon. Those who are out of our time zone. I hope I'm loud and clear on the other side.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to be in the next 10 minutes talking about the critical path theoretical framework for the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. This is one of the chapters which is core to my research. My research is theory driven. However, the theoretical framing regarding business and human rights remains largely abstract, including the actual elaboration of the different national action plans. The aim of my research has already been introduced, but the focus is basically on 3 countries, that is Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. I'm doing a comparative study because it's one, theory driven, and secondly, these states have made a commitment to elaborate a national action plan as a measure for the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which was adopted in 2011 by the United Nations. Now, what is the current context that cuts across globally regarding business and human rights? Governance issues remains at the core of business and human rights, but this is of course subject to different contexts. The governance issues they're trying to talk about here is basically the lack of clarity or a regulatory framework for business relationship with human rights, largely at the international level and also at the national level. And this has given businesses a big latitude to go about abusing human rights, and also the states, especially business enterprises that are owned by the state, largely violating human rights, especially those which are arising from the treaty obligations. Now, there is limited empirical evidence, however, regarding the grounding of action plans on business and human rights. Currently, we have 24 national action plans on business and human rights that have been adopted by the 24 different countries, and none of this is in Africa. Yet, cases of human rights abuses are significant in this continent, including also among Asia states, or those states which are undergoing development. Now, the elaboration of the 24 National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, as I indicated earlier, there is no clear evidence how they are grounded in human rights theories. And this is where we go, we're starting to have a lot of questions, that if states are to pursue bridging the gap in the relationship between businesses and human rights, using the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, then there is need for grounding on human rights theories. But which human rights theories remains also non-linear in terms of which one gives the best grounding for the development of these plans. Now, human rights also remains very broad, what we call the claims domain. If you are elaborating a national action plan on business and human rights, which rights are at stake? And this ranges from civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Now, states are under a catch-22, if I would say, in elaborating national action plans on business and human rights. And this is where I have come up with this theoretical proposition, what we call the critical framework on business and human rights, to give them a phased way or a step-by-step guidance on how to go about planning that is guided by human rights theory. Now, in elaborating this theoretical proposition, I have looked at three different theories, and one is the general theory of human rights planning by Chalabi. The other one is the human rights-based approach to development, which is a common, elaborated by the United Nations Development Group as a common goal of achievement. Initially, they were looking at this theory to help the different UN agencies in integrating human rights across all their different programs and policy framework. The other theory is the theory of change. The theory of change is quite broad because majorly it's applied in the behavioral science domain. It has origin in the 1951 work of Fritz and his other colleagues. But it's basically talking of, if we are saying change, compliance with human rights, what rights are we trying to talk about, and how does it translate into the actual realization of such a right by the rights holders? Now, the three theories, I've examined them based on their weaknesses and strength, and I've tried to see how best can it fit within the planning domain of a national action plan on business and human rights. Because in the absence of grounding of national action plan on business and human rights on international human rights standards and principles, then that plan can never be effective in terms of realizing either state obligations or the rights in themselves by the different rights holders. The range of stakeholders we are trying to talk about here are three: the state, that is government; business enterprises, that is businesses which remains largely unregulated in regard to human rights; and also the rights holders, people who are at the receiving end or who on a day-to-day basis on the forefront of claiming these rights. Now, how does the critical path framework play about? Phase one that I've tried to elaborate here is that it involves information gathering. Information gathering should be guided by the theoretical propositions under the general theory of human rights, under the human rights-based approach to development, and the theory of change. Now, if we are looking at the three pillar areas of the UN guiding principles, the first pillar area talks about the state's duty to protect human rights. The information we have to be gathering here has to fall within the state duty to protect. Legislative measures could be policy or programs that are being pursued by the state in this regard. The second one is the state, business responsibilities to protect human rights. To respect human rights, I beg your pardon. Now, how are businesses integrating human rights, and what measures are they having internally to help them guard against the risk of abusing human rights? And the third one is access to remedy. Now, information has to be gathered across all the three pillar areas. The second one is prioritization. Now, because contexts are valid, you cannot depend on one grand theory. Developing states present different contexts from the developed states. Industrialized states they present different contexts, and now each pillar should be in position. After collecting the necessary data, we should be in position to prioritize based on the agency, and this is where the assessment come in. Under pillar one, what are the issues that we are prioritizing? Under pillar two and under pillar three. Then we go down to look at the issues that have been prioritized. What is the causal relationship that these issues have in regard to factors that are mitigating these issues to come up? If we, for example, say there is gross corruption going about in country A, we need to go deeper to look at the root cause of the issue of corruption in country A. And when we go into the root cause of this specific issue, that is where Now we shall go to the next phase, and that is the theory of change. So before I go to the last phase, the causality relationship under pillar 1, pillar 2, you are going up to the root factor that is, or conditions that are driving these issues in any given state or in any given context. Now, the theory of change here, that is the last phase, is basically coming up with a goal or coming up with what needs to be done and by who. And under each of the pillar, I gave an example of corruption in country A. If corruption is a big issue and we have gotten the root of these issues, now the theory of change talks about how do we move from the point where corruption is a big issue to a point where the state has been before corruption, and then move them to a better position where you could be nearing zero tolerance or having measures which are dealing directly with corruption issues. And this goes ahead to pillar 1 area, pillar 2 area, which is business enterprises. What are they supposed to be doing if they're party to the corruption issue? And the third pillar is access to remedy. Are there mechanisms that are helping those whose rights are being violated in this regard, access remedy? Now, the theory of change gives us where we are supposed to move from the state that has been established in a given context. So basically this helps, the theoretical framing I'm trying to come up with is basically to anchor international human rights standards within the planning domain and help state look at it from a logical point of view, that if you start from phase 3 and you ignore phase 1, then there is a high chance that the plan is going to be ineffective. And you cannot also say you are going to start from phase 5 and you ignore phase 1, 2, and 3. So there need to be a logical approach to establishing a national action plan. So in brief, this is what I have to share. Thank you very much.